A man once came to his rabbi and said, "Rabbi, I committed a sin and I need to know what I should do to make amends." Eager to help the man do tshuva, the rabbi said, "Please tell me the sin and I can tell you what you need to do, what the answer is." The man said and explained, "I didn't wash my hands and say the bracha before eating bread." The rabbi thought, "That's not so terrible. I've heard worse, right? Even I have heard worse." So he said to the man, "It's not so bad. But tell me why? Why didn't you say the blessing? Why didn't you wash your hands?" The man looked a little embarrassed. Said, "To be honest, Rabbi, it was awkward. I wasn't sure what to do. I felt weird doing it. You see, I was eating in a non-kosher restaurant." I raised an eyebrow for the rabbi. "Well, why were you eating that in a non-kosher restaurant?" I said, "You don't get it, Rabbi. I didn't have a choice. All the kosher restaurants were closed." The rabbi was shocked. "What do you mean all the kosher restaurants were closed?" I said, "Well, Rabbi, it was Yom Kippur." But that joke captures a problem I've noticed with Judaism. People often feel like if I do one sin, I might as well do them all. I don't keep this mitzvah, so why not also not keep that mitzvah? Like it's an all or nothing. I didn't fast, so I didn't eat kosher, so I didn't say a blessing, and I didn't wash my hands. Like the character in the story, in the joke. There's often today an all or nothing attitude towards Jewish life and practice. But there's a problem with that. And the problem is that nobody keeps all of the commandments 100% perfectly 100% of the time. And if everyone thought this way, nobody would keep any of them. But there's one commandment, one mitzvah in particular I want to talk to you about tonight. And this one is fitting, I think, to talk about on the new year on Kol Nidre, because it is one that impacts, I think, probably every Jewish family in some way. But before I begin, I want to offer a couple more caveats. So I'm afraid to dive into it. I hope now that I've made many of you laugh, you'll forgive me in a little bit when I make you uncomfortable. Because I fear I'm going to make many of you uncomfortable. But it's an okay feeling. This time of year, we're supposed to be doing cheshbon hanefesh. We're supposed to be looking at ourselves, taking stock of our deeds from this last year, taking inventory of our lives. And the truth is, if we aren't a little bit uncomfortable, then we aren't really doing cheshbon nefesh. This time of year is a season of discomfort, because we should be critiquing ourselves so we can be better in the year to come. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel once said, "It's the job of the rabbi to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable." So to those who might be uncomfortable with what I say, I'm sorry. But I hope that you'll still listen. I ask that you try to hear my words and really think about what I'm trying to say, the message behind it, because I believe it's essential to the future of our people today. I want to talk about the third rail of Jewish communal life, intermarriage. And knowing how sensitive this topic is, I want to give a second caveat. I want to ask that if you discuss this topic, and I hope you do, I hope my sermon gets people talking about something really important. And it's okay if you disagree with me. But I hope that if you discuss this topic with your family, with your friends, with our community, that you remember that we're not talking about statistics in a vacuum. We're talking about the real life experiences of people that deserve dignity and respect. It's easy to throw out slogans and catchphrases when we talk about intermarriage. But we're talking about our brothers and sisters, fellow Jews. And we need to remember that in these conversations. Now the Torah is clear. In Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 3, Lo titachen bam, do not intermarry with them. Them being the non-Jews living in the land of Israel. The Torah seems to be unequivocal. But despite the clear commandment, intermarriage is an important topic. Because so many Jews have not heeded that mitzvah. According to the Pew study, over 58% of Jews married in the United States in the last 2 decades married someone who's not Jewish. Now here in Canada, I know people are very proud that in Canada the statistics are not the same as in the United States, but they're not so far behind. The most recent Canadian survey done just a few years ago suggests that over a quarter of young Canadian Jews today marry someone not Jewish. A quarter. And as a rabbi, someone deeply concerned with the future of Judaism in North America, I want to have an honest and serious conversation about this topic. So the first fact is that in our world today, when you tell a teen, when you tell someone in their 20s and 30s not to date someone who isn't Jewish, they hear something very different often than what you're really trying to say. Most do not hear that our tradition of the last 2,000 years is sacred, that we have to do everything possible to pass it on to the next generation. They don't hear, I want my own parents' and grandparents' legacies to be honored, and my grandkids someday to sit around a Shabbat table as I did when I was young, to sing the songs, to do the acts that I did when I was growing up. When you tell someone, don't date someone who isn't Jewish, today, far too often, we hear traces of xenophobia, undertones of bigotry. And it's not the message people are trying to send. But I'm telling you, that's what it sounds like too often today. Nearly 30% of Jews in the Pew survey identified their religion as none. You've probably heard that statistic before. These are people who are born Jewish. People who, when asked what religion they identify with, the answer they give is none. None of them. They don't say Judaism, they don't say anything else. The fastest growing religion in our world today is nonism. So I want us to ask ourselves, will we be more upset if a child or grandchild brought home someone who isn't Jewish, but supportive of creating a Jewish home? Or someone who's born Jewish, but has zero attachment to Judaism whatsoever? No desire to participate in the religion, no desire to participate in community. Someone whose religion, despite their birthright, is none. Someone who actively wants nothing at all to do with Judaism. Another issue is telling people not to date or marry those of other faiths. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. We've been saying it for centuries, but it happens more and more and more. Not because we don't say it loud enough, not because rabbis don't say it often enough, and grandparents and parents and institutions don't say it often enough, but because of love. Now, to some of you that sounds naive, but I'll elaborate. There was a time when marrying out of the faith was an act of rebellion. There was certainly a time when it was someone's way of saying they don't want to participate in Jewish life anymore, in Jewish community. But that's not the time we live in today. People fall in love. And love isn't a logical thing. It's something much deeper. It makes people do things that don't always make sense, that even they sometimes don't understand. Tonight on Kol Nidre, we're talking about love. It's that very subject. We're going to strike our chests. We're going to say to God, we have sinned. We have made mistakes. We've turned our backs on you. We've done the wrong thing. But we're going to ask God to forgive us because God loves us. Forgiveness makes sense simply because God loves us. We affirm tonight that love is more powerful than strict justice. So how do we defend our demand for in-marriage? I want to suggest a different strategy. I want to suggest something different. I want to suggest that instead of telling someone why they should not fall in love with someone who isn't Jewish, we focus on giving people meaningful Jewish experiences. We instead focus on helping people to have a Jewish life that's of value. What I mean by that is teach your kids and grandkids why Judaism is important to you. Show them. Do Jewish. Teach people why Judaism is something to be valued. The truth is, with everything else that's important to us, we don't have to command it, we show it. You don't tell your children not to date someone who's a bigot. You teach them to value inclusion, and they find a partner that shares that value. We teach our kids values, and they seek them out from partners who share those values. Education, family, hard work, kindness, loyalty. Other values are taught, not commanded, but we command. Don't date someone not Jewish. Instead of that, I think we should be focused on a larger question. How can we teach them? How can we teach the next generation to value Judaism so it's something that they want for themselves? How do we teach them to love Shabbat? Because if you can get someone to love Shabbat, to value Shabbat, then they'll seek a partner that shares that value, whether or not they're Jewish. They'll seek a partner that will support them in celebrating Shabbat in their home, creating a home where family gets together every week, where families turn off the outside world and stay together every week for 24 hours. Teach them to live in community. Teach them why that's valuable. To value prayer, to value Israel, to value the wisdom our millennia-old tradition shares with us. Teach them to value Judaism itself. And if we succeed at that, people will find partners that support their values. Jewish or not, they will look for a partner that will help them to create a Jewish home. Because the truth is today, there are non-Jewish partners who are helping to create Jewish homes. Intermarriage, it's true, is a threat to the Jewish future. But it's a symptom. It masks the disease itself. And the disease is that we're failing in the non-Orthodox world to offer a Judaism that is meaningful to the next generation. We fail to teach them why it should be that Judaism in itself is a value. We might not always be successful in teaching the value of Judaism, but what we've been doing isn't working. We've done a great job over the years of teaching specific Jewish values. Tikkun olam, repairing the world. Kavod habriot, human dignity. Tzedakah, charity. Chesed, kindness. All of these Jewish values have become the defining religion for many of those nuns. People that learn Jewish values, but never learn the value of Judaism. When so many Jews are not participating in Jewish life at home and at the synagogue, anyone who wants to do Jewish, anyone who wants to support creating a Jewish home should be welcomed. We need to be more welcoming to the non-Jewish partners. Partners who aren't looking to convert, but who want to participate in Jewish life with their families. We can't afford to keep cutting them off and turning them away. The UJA did a study a couple of years ago, just right here in Toronto. Found that among interfaith families, more than half of them want to be more connected to Jewish communal organizations. More than half of them want to be more connected to Jewish communal organizations. Our organizations are struggling to connect with Jews, and yet turning away these families, pushing them away. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to that tried to come to synagogue, but after hearing comments from congregants or rabbis and clergy disparaging of intermarriage, disparaging of their family, their life choices, their family's choices, it wasn't the place for them anymore. They felt pushed away. I can't tell you how many people I talked to have told me how they've tried to build a Jewish home. They've tried to support their partner in creating Shabbat or holidays, celebrations. But there haven't been avenues for them to learn, to be supported by the community in the same way other young families are. We spend so much time worrying and discussing intermarriage. And yet, the Pew study found that interfaith parents were more than twice as likely to raise their children as Jewish than those who were nuns, those who stopped identifying as Jewish. I want to repeat that. I think it's an important statistic. Interfaith families were more than twice as likely to raise their children as Jewish than those who simply did consider themselves Jewish, but nuns. But still, some want to paint intermarriage as the greatest existential threat to the Jewish people. A few years ago, I remember, because it was horribly offensive, a member of the Israeli Knesset referred to intermarriage in North America as a second Holocaust. It's not what's happening. It's the irrelevance of our Judaism. It's the exclusion of those who want to participate that is killing off a future. There's a radical story in the Talmud. The Amalekites were the people who tried to kill us in the Torah. So we wandered out of Egypt. Who preyed on the weak and the old in the back. And the rabbis throughout the generations have connected all of those who sought the destruction of the Jewish people to the Amalekites, to their descendants. From Haman in Persia, to the Babylonians, to the Nazis. The Talmud has something radical to say about the origin of Amalek, though. It tells us that their matriarch, Timnah, first went to Abraham. She went to Abraham and asked to be a part of the Jewish people, to join in and be a part of the family. But he said no. Later she went to Yitzhak, and he too questioned her motives and said no. Finally, she went to the third patriarch, to Jacob, asking to convert, to be among the Jewish people. But he said no. She so desperately wanted to be a part of the family, but the only person who would take her in, the only person who would marry her was Abraham's grandson, Eliphaz, the son of Esau. And he wouldn't even really marry her. He only agreed to take her as his concubine. The rabbis in the Talmud take this story and they teach that it was through this union of Eliphaz and Timnah that the nation of Amalek was born. The nation that would cause our ancestors to suffer throughout the generations was brought into existence due to their own acts, their own exclusiveness. The lessons the rabbis are trying to teach here is a radical lesson. Exclusion is an existential threat. Excluding people without good reason can lead to terrible results. And today we're seeing those results. A third of Jews today don't identify as Jewish. Meanwhile, there are families that want to participate who are pushing them away because they have a partner that isn't Jewish. Why are we making it harder for them? Why are we pushing away people who want to be among us? I shouldn't need to say it, but I want to be clear. I'm not advocating in favor of intermarriage. It's not the point. I'm against people living a life without our traditions and its values. I'm also against Jews marrying Jews with no intention of living a Jewish life and raising more nuns. What I'm in favor of is people living Judaism. I'm in favor of people creating Jewish homes, building Jewish families, doing Jewish. And for those who are intermarried, but want to raise a Jewish family, want to live a life of Jewish values and traditions, want to live a life connected to the Jewish community, then we should welcome them. I want to support them and help them in that task. I started with the joke. The man confesses he didn't say a blessing, he didn't eat kosher, he didn't fast. The man in the story saw it as all or nothing. But Judaism isn't all or nothing. We're all human. We're all confessing today and striking our chest because we've all made mistakes. Because none of us have lived up to every single one of our ideals this past year. Is it not better that someone who eats on Yom Kippur eats kosher? Is it not better that someone who eats treif at least has a blessing? Is it not better that those who intermarry participate in community rather than not? But we need to create a space where they can. Not just a space that makes the Jewish partner and the children feel welcome, because we have to do better at that too, but the non-Jewish partner. The person who's dedicated to supporting creating a Jewish home, even though they themselves aren't Jewish, we have to welcome them. Tonight from this bima, I want to recognize and thank anyone here who isn't Jewish. Anyone who, despite the obstacles you face, have bound yourselves to the Jewish people through marriage, through a commitment to building, creating a family in a Jewish home. Those of you who have supported our community in the work that we do, sacred work. Those of you who have supported your Jewish partner in raising a Jewish family. Those of you who are parents of Jewish children have actively taken a role in ensuring they provide with a Jewish education, that they have access to Jewish resources. People probably don't think about it, but it's not that rare. Often as a rabbi, I'll meet a family in which a parent isn't Jewish, but they've dedicated themselves to raising Jewish children. I'll meet a mother who's taking her children to convert, even though she herself isn't. It's a personal choice. People make it for a variety of reasons. I'm here to help people that want to convert and go through that process. There needs to be a distinction, ritually, between those who go through the act, those who are Jewish, and those who aren't. But those who choose to support raising a Jewish home and not convert themselves, I understand it. And I appreciate their dedication and support in building a Jewish family. I thank you. I want to address as well the parents and grandparents who see this in their own family. In days of old, marrying someone not Jewish was a sign of turning one's back on Judaism. It was a sign of turning one's back on the community and on rejecting your family's values and traditions. If that's how you feel, because a child or a grandchild has fallen in love with someone who isn't Jewish, I want to tell you that's not the case. It's about love. They're not rejecting you and your values. They're not rejecting your traditions. They've fallen in love with someone. So the answer is to respond with love, to welcome their partner, to thank them for whatever they do, big or small, to help your child or grandchild create a Jewish home, to raise Jewish children. People often see it as a failure. They did something wrong as a parent or grandparent. But you didn't fail. Love is not logical. I know many think of it as a tragedy, but don't. People used to sit Shiva for someone who married out, and I understand. It's upsetting. I understand why people did. But I see real tragedies on a regular basis. I'll never forget one day when I met with a grandparent distressed over their newborn grandson who wouldn't be raised Jewish. I understand. I really do why that grandparent was upset. Yet the same day, I also spoke with a family that was devastated because two newborn twins were premature and were fighting for their lives. It put it in perspective for me. Are your children healthy and happy? Are your grandchildren healthy and happy? If you step back, there are things in this world worth mourning over. If they're healthy and happy, the other isn't one of them. It's hard to find someone in the world today. I know personally that. As someone who only a few years ago was out there in the dating world, I can tell you firsthand it is difficult to find a partner. Along my journey, I met many Jews who I was overwhelmingly compatible with, but they did not want to create a Jewish home. They believed in Jewish values, but not the value of Judaism. And for me, it was a non-negotiable value. But I understand why for many it isn't. They meet someone they get along with. Someone who's compassionate and kind, generous and loving, hardworking and fun. They find someone who shares those other values with them, and Judaism is secondary because we haven't taught them the value. The increase in intermarriage is a reality because we live in a world today where thankfully we can mingle quite freely with society beyond our own. For centuries, the problem was that they hated us. Today, the problem is that too many of them love us. I take the latter over the former any day. It's an incredibly complicated time in Jewish history. There's a wide variety of ideas and activities. Jewish life has to compete in a much broader marketplace for people's time and energy. That is why we must teach people to value Judaism. And the best way to do that is to live our lives by example, to value our traditions, to practice them ourselves, to welcome anybody who wants to participate and be a part of Jewish life. We don't have an intermarriage problem. We have a problem of many Jews not finding the Judaism they've been given compelling. And that's what we must address. This year, may God guide us in bringing people closer to Torah, closer to Jewish practices, closer to community by welcoming them. May we value our heritage enough to share it with others, to welcome everyone who wants to be a part. May we teach others to value it not through prescriptions and commands, but through love and joy, through family and community, through celebration and meaning. Shana Tova Umetuka.